Greetings, my YouTube family. Thank you so much for visiting this channel. So, today I want to just share the 10 books that changed my life. Basically, in my investment journey, I have read many books, but I find these books to be very outstanding. So, I shall be sharing those 10 books and a summary of what I learned from those books. And just so you understand, this channel is just for educational purposes. So, these are just my views. So let's get started. So successful investors in the world are readers. In other words, to be a successful investor, it is important that one spends time reading and understanding what's going on around the world, or also if one is focusing on investing in individual companies, it's very important that you understand what's going on in that business. For example, in the United States, there is the Security Exchange Commission. So all the publicly listed companies that trade in the United States, they are required by law to file whatever changes that may have happened during the course of the year. So you find out that if there are those changes, they file the forms. Some of them they include like the 10K. So if you go there on the Security Exchange Commission in the United States, for those who invest in the United States, you'll find out that there is information about the business. If there are some insiders who may have sold shares or their financial statements, it's required by law. For those who invest in Canada, there is the Canadian Securities Administrators. It does the same. It plays the same role of enforcing and making sure that investors are safe because there are billions that exchange hands in the stock market. So it's very important that you understand where to find that information. And in addition to that, I have also come to understand that there are other important journals, financial journals in the world that have very interesting information. For example, if one is investing in the United States stock markets, uh, journals like the Barron's, CNBC, I like to sometimes just watch if I just want to see what is happening in the world. Let's say I'm preparing to get to work, and then I just watch or listen to what is happening in the market at that particular day. And most people also know New York Times. But for those who want a more global outlook, I tend to find the Financial Times to be uh, a very interesting read because it covers mostly if you want to invest in the European markets, right? So you can find information there. And then the Economist, they issue the Economist magazine once a month. So the Economist, I like that it covers the whole world. So you get to understand what's going on around the world, be it the geopolitics, major events. So once in a while, I actually, read the Economist magazine to just have an outlook of what's happening in the world. Because if you are investing, you can actually take advantage of what's happening in the world. And in Canada, particularly, I like reading the Globe and Mail. So this is a very interesting um, read because you can subscribe, but also there are some free uh, um, stories or even issues to do with the financial markets, or even if you want to select some stocks, there are also some screeners that are available for free via the Globe and Mail application or even online. And that is it for the journals that I read. So I don't spend much time, but I just be it 5 minutes just having an idea of what's going on around the world. So when I have time, I then sit down. If I find something that is interesting, I then read it in detail. And now, when it comes to books, the books that really have changed my life really includes the first one that I would put on that list, not necessarily in order of it being the best, but this is one of the book that I read and quit like a millionaire. This is a book that I read. It helped me understand, the importance of just, taking care of your control of your finances. But the idea, in short, in this book is that if you really want to have options in life, you have to start thinking about retirement now. In countries like Canada and the United States, uh, there are retirement packages. For example, in Canada, there's the Canada Pension Plan, which is a federal plan that every person who works they contribute, and when they reach retirement age, then um, uh, they get money. And there are other options like the old age security, and also other employers they contribute. So there are various pensions plan that are available. But one thing that I find interesting is that these are mostly in the long term. So you're looking at, probably, if you want to retire, let's say at 65, right? So for most people who want to retire early, in other words, retiring doesn't necessarily mean that you stop doing anything in life, but you can then focus on things that you like. But if you like, for example, for me, I would like to work for a job that I particularly like. So without worrying about the pressure of paying bills. So it doesn't mean that if someone retires, you just wake up and just sit at home. That could be a choice, but so that's what I mean with retirement. But it is a process. So if you start early, then you take advantage of compound interest as your money grows, and then if you are particularly residing in Canada, for example, there are other options, like I mentioned, the Canada Pension Plan, the old age security, and other employers. They have various types of retirement schemes. And you can also invest your own money and match uh, that other income that you would get at the retirement age. So this book was very great because it focuses on readers who are based in Canada and the United States. So this is an easy to do approach if you want to retire, in that they have their very interesting model on how to calculate the amount that you need for you to retire. So I found this to be very interesting. Then the second book that really changed my outlook on retirement is Playing with Fire. This book is very interesting because when I read this book, it made me start to think about other expenses that I would ordinarily be just, wasting money. In other words, I realized that when I discussed this with my wife, my partner, then I realized that there were a lot of other things that I was just subscribing to. For example, you see, like some people can subscribe to Netflix, YouTube Premium, and Amazon Prime, or all those other things. But when you look at how they use those services, sometimes it's just money that is coming out of your checking account every month. So it made me introspect, um, you know, every money that is coming in and going out of my account. I now have to understand where that transaction is happening and for what reason. So this is a very interesting book, and a lot of people they know, or they may have heard about this guy, Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey. This is one of the books that I read, and one key takeaway from this book by Dave Ramsey is that this guy is against, I mean, he recommends people to avoid debt, because debt can be a tool that can bury you alive. Because what happens is, if there is interest, it's very complicated. It's designed in a manner that if you fall behind in terms of your payments, it can ruin your credit history. So if you want anything in the future, uh, let's say you want to buy a home, credit history is important. So this guy recommends that you must build an emergency fund, and you must always make sure that you have cash or you have money in your debit or in your checking account uh, before you even purchase something using a credit card. In other words, as soon as you pay using the credit card, then you have to pay it off from your debit account. In other words, you do cash only basis. But for investments or securities like a house, for example, houses here in Vancouver, they are going for 1 million, right? It's very challenging for most people to be able to afford housing 1 million in cash. So a lot of people they finance. And then the fourth book that I found interesting is The Lessons of History. So one thing that I am learning is in my investing journey is that a lot of things that happen, they keep on happening again and again. So if you understand the history, right, then you can be in a position to avoid making those mistakes that way that happened or that people made in the future. For example, time in again and again, people get so excited when there's uh, a bull run in the market. In other words, the stock market is going up and up and up. And I remember in 2020 when COVID hit and 2021, there were a lot of Sparks companies that wanted to list, and they had very high valuations that, in my view, were not really uh, based on fundamentals like the revenues or the income streams that they were bringing in, the cash flows. So, in the end, most of those companies they were listed at high prices, and a lot of investors they jumped in. But what happened is it the stock prices they reverted to the mean. That's the fundamental. If something is overvalued, that may best in the future. And most people may think of the dot-com era where companies were just having astronomical valuation. So this is something that I found interesting, and also you find that you can understand even why central banks um, are formed, what do they do. So you get to understand the history. Sometimes most of the life lessons that happen, they've happened in the past. So just going back and reflecting um, from history, you can learn a lot of things, that can be helpful in the future. And then the next book, this is the fifth book now, that really I found interesting: The Delusion of Crowds. Why do people go mad in groups? As an investor, one thing that I have learned over the past 3 or 4 years that I have been investing in the stock market is that a lot of people they just follow what they see on the news or what they check on other public platforms, and someone says, "Oh, there's this stock that is going to go YOLO, it's going to go up." I'm not saying it's bad or I'm not judging, but investing is risky, right? So, as an investor with a long term mindset, it is very, very important that uh, you understand your actions and not just do things because everyone else is doing it. So, in other words, the crowd, the head behavior. So, it just refreshed my mind that it is very important to do that. And the sixth book that I found interesting is A Random Walk Down Wall Street. So this book I found it very interesting because it has some information about the time-tested strategies, you know, and one takeaway from this is that in most cases, index funds they beat most hedge fund managers in the United States, and I think also to an extent even around the world. So sometimes instead of trying to build a very complicated portfolio to the extent that it can confuse you, sometimes it's good to just understand what's happening in the market, focus on specific strategy, investing strategy that you are attuned to do, that you understand, and then go with it. And once you do that, once in a while, it's also important to understand what's going on around the world and act accordingly. And it also gives a very interesting account of the capital asset pricing model. Those uh, fundamental theories in finance that helps investors understand. For example, basically sometimes some people I grew up when I was starting to be interested in investing, people were talking about the capital asset pricing model to say, let's say there's a relationship between stocks and bonds. In other words, when stocks go down, right, bonds go up. So if you want your portfolio to be balanced, you have to look for an allocation that you are comfortable with, right? In the sense that, let's say you are about to retire, you can still get some cash flows even when the market is down, right? And the other book that I found to be interesting is Misbehaving. Richard Taylor is a very famous and a Nobel laureate. Actually, he's a very interesting guy. He writes a lot about the behavioral economics. You find that if you're an investor, a lot of people they lose money because of the behavior. For example, when the market is uh, dropping, a lot of people they panic and sell, and not necessarily because those stocks or those securities they may have lost values in some cases, right? But because there's a sell-off, right? So again and again people repeat that, they buy at the top, right? Just because maybe sometimes there's a lot of hullabaloo in the news, and then they sell at the bottom. If you are investing for the long term, but like I mentioned in the other video, some people they are short sellers. They sell, in other words, they borrow from the broker and then they buy at the bottom, thereby making a profit, right? Being the difference between the selling price, the high selling price, and the low buying price minus the fees and taxes. So this book, it reminds me that it's very very important to understand your behavior, and find ways to avoid uh, just falling victim to the rapid changes in the market. In other words, you can also take advantage of that. If there is a sell-off, for example, and you have fundamentally good businesses, you can just buy good businesses or after doing due diligence. And I stress that because it's very very important. And the other interesting book that I found is The Psychology of Money. This book by this guy Morgan Housel, I found it to be a gold mine. It talks about human behavior, the psychology. It's very very important. You find that investors they spend a lot of time reading books, understanding what's going on around the world, and also understanding what's going on in the business they want to invest in. So you find that a lot of people now, when it then comes to controlling their emotions, then they fall victim to what's happening, the noise around them. So this book is a very interesting book, and it talks about a lot of things that have happened again and again, and I found it to be very interesting. And then I read this book, The Almanac of Naval by Naval Ravikant. This is a very interesting book about different sources of income, human behavior, and also insights about being an investor. And this is a very interesting book, The Intelligent Investor. This one, for everyone who wants to invest, this is a must read book, because even though it's written in very uh, I mean, in a language that for some people, for me, I have a background in economics, so I understand almost most of the stuff in this book. But you have to read it slowly again and again. But the key takeaway in this book is businesses they have to generate revenues, and you have to understand businesses. If the business is not being profitable, it's not generating return on investment, then when you invest also, uh, you must understand the margin of safety. So Benjamin Graham is the father of investing. even people like Warren Buffett, they follow they give credit to this guy, because this guy, his theories is the value investing. Basically, when you invest in value. He's a value based investor. But there are different approaches to investing, right? So lastly but not least, this book is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. This is a very interesting book. A lot of people, from the reviews that I got, they find it to be very boring. But this is more like it talks about the human behavior. Like, people have system one and system two. And system one is like it's panic, panic. And usually, if you're investing in the stock market, sometimes there's a lot of noise, right? So you have to mute that noise, right? And attune to system two, where you think without emotions, rationally, and understand what's really going on without necessarily falling victim to the crowd behavior. So I would say these books, they've changed my mind, my life, in the sense that I enjoyed reading them, and once in a while I go back, I read them. And in conclusion, one might say, okay, maybe you have the money to buy all those books. Of course, you have to pay tuition if you want to be successful in anything. But also, the good thing about countries like Canada, at least from where I live, I know that there's a public library. So you can just go there, you read, or they can order the books from anywhere in the world. And you can get 2 weeks grace period where you can read and understand. And reading is very interesting for me, because at least you understand what other people are thinking, or their thinking process, because that's how you learn. That's one way of learning. So thank you so much, and I hope you will be able to you'll be successful in your investing journey, and I hope to get some feedback when you read these books in the future. Thank you, and don't forget to subscribe on this channel.